it's really great. Again, when you have questions like, hey, I want to try making my own laundry powder. Has anyone ever done that before? You'll get tons of responses. And what's nice too is you don't just get tons of responses going, oh, I did, here's the recipe. You'll get people who go, remember, it can be hard on pipes. So if you've got older pipes, it's not the answers can be really thoughtful, much more so than even like a Google search. If you put in, how to make laundry powder, you will get the articles on how to make laundry powder. You might not get the articles about or remember all these other reasons that you might want to be careful or consider not doing it. So that's the nice thing about the community is that it is talking to people who have their own perspective and experiences that they are willing to share that. And yeah, it's been incredibly valuable. There are days where you can definitely tell when you're reading people's responses that like you have changed a mind or you have brought someone closer to being able to feel like they can now take that step and make that, whether it's one change or a bunch of changes in their life. And that's really great to see too, is that you both get the influence of other people, but you get to see the influence you have on other people as well.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. The Outdoor Minimalist podcast has the goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. Zero waste is something that, let's be real, is super hard to achieve. I myself will likely never be truly zero waste, but much like my approach to minimalism, I see zero waste as a journey more than an endpoint. And several years ago, when I was starting to get more serious about reducing my impact, I came across a Facebook group all about zero waste, and it was called Zero Waste, Zero Judgement. The name in and of itself is kind of what drew me in, and so I decided to join. While I'm no longer on Facebook, or at least at the time of the recording, I'm not on Facebook right now. But for a long time, this group was a place that I could ask questions and get honest, kind answers from individuals from all over the world, looking to help encourage one another to minimize our impact. So, in episode 138 of the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, I'm super excited to introduce the current moderator of that group and the person that helped it grow to what it is today, Stephanie Hart. Stephanie drives 65,000 all-electric miles per year to bring truly sustainable, locally made, closed-loop products to zero waste and refill shops up and down the West Coast. She's building tools for eco-centered small businesses to thrive and reach thousands more customers per day. She has a knack for looking at an issue from multiple angles, so one solution does not exacerbate other areas of sustainability. And she shares her insights and fosters community in the ever-growing Facebook group, Zero Waste, Zero Judgement. Well, thank you for joining me on the Outdoor Minimalist podcast today, Stephanie. I am excited to finally be talking about the topic of zero waste on the show. It's a theme that runs through a lot of our content, but now we have a dedicated episode just for this. And so I guess for the listeners, do you mind just introducing yourself and overviewing what got you interested in the zero waste movement?
Yeah, I sure can. So my name is Stephanie Hart. And how I got interested was I actually was always somewhat eco-conscious. And in particular, I'd say that most of my working life, I was interested in working in a field that was eco-conscious. I actually worked in the electric vehicle industry for 4 years. And then um, during that time, we were living in Campbell, California, near San Jose. And I love the Campbell Farmers Market on Sundays. And we were there and we saw a booth of one of the non-food vendors. And it was someone who was transitioning their zero waste shop from the like Carmel area up to San Jose. And I was like, when I was talking to her, I was like, what do you mean zero waste? That doesn't make sense to me. And she explained to me some of the movement. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But as we're walking away, I turned to my husband, I kept going, do you know how many diapers we've thrown away? Do you know how many toothbrushes we've thrown away? Do you know how many? And I was just driving myself crazy and driving him crazy. And it really struck me then. And then for like a week, I was like spiraling, going, you know, do we need to live this way? Like, are there alternatives kind of thing? Like, I didn't even realize kind of thing. And so I did a few weeks of research and was like, okay, this is cool. I want to start reducing my waste. And being in the Bay Area, there are a lot of options. There are grocers down there that will let you bring your own containers and stuff like that. So I started looking into it a little bit. But then I had just had my son. So I had approached both his daycare and my mother-in-law was providing most of our childcare about starting to do cloth diapering. And they both just said no, like flat out no. And so it's like, okay, that one. And he was pretty close to being potty trained anyway. So it's like, oh, maybe we'll just fast track potty training, and then we'll be out of that particular one. But just as I moved through my life for the next several months, it was just always in the back of my head. I was transitioning out of my position at the electric vehicle charging company as my daughter was going into half day kindergarten, and it was like the schedules just didn't line up. And so then I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? Looking for groups to volunteer with and stuff to get into. And I actually discovered this wonderful toy store in our area. Absolutely loved her. I was in there all the time. But I was like, everything is plastic. Everything is disposable. Everything is like not sustainable whatsoever. So I was trying to introduce her to some sustainable brands that I had come across along the way. And she was saying, that's all great. Not really interested. But eventually, one of the times I came in, she said, you know, it'd be great is if I had like a little sustainable section that either we could do a store within a store or you can maintain it. And so I started going real hardcore into researching this. I was working out of a co-working space because I started doing a contract job. And in the contract space, someone said, oh, that sounds like Refill Madness, this eco-friendly shop that's in our area. And I was like, what refill? What's that? And so I went in and they're this wonderful store that just have tons of refill options, all of the home soaps and personal care products and just a lot of wonderful stuff. Completely fell in love with them. You know, was in there every other day asking, how do I help? How do I do more? And I noticed that when I would try to, it was about 30 minutes, 40 with traffic from my house when I would tell people in my local community, because I was starting to get much more involved with like mom groups and nonprofits in my area and the schools and stuff like that. And when I would talk this place up to people, they'd be like, oh, it's 40 minutes away and I'm not sure. They don't have great parking. And so I was like, okay, they need this down here by us. And that was around the time that I was like, I'm actually going to transition this into a business, that I started going, okay, so what are my online resources? How could I market this? What are my social communities? And I found local zero waste communities that were really wonderful. I met up with a few of those people as I was, you know, trying to pick people's brains. Like, okay, if I'm going to start a business around this, like, what would people actually buy? What do people actually need? And, you know, that kind of thing. And then I came across the zero waste, zero judgment community and joined that too, and loved the activism in the group. At that time, I believe they were just shy of 3,000 members. That was October of 2019. Actually, that might have been earlier in 2019. And then as I was loving the group and interacting with it more, they put out a call for additional admins and moderators, and I volunteered. And so I got brought on as an admin. It's actually October of 2019 that the head admin, Lexi, she was like, okay, I'm giving up control of this group. Who wants to take it over? And no one else volunteered. And I was like, well, I don't want it to go away. That was the option. Someone take it over or it's going away. And I was like, I hadn't really moderated a group. I had a fan group for the Arizona Diamondbacks that I was like passively running. I think it's a page, it's not even a group. So I hadn't run a group at all before that point, and was like, and I wasn't in zero waste very long, like at most a year, but I just loved very much the concept of the zero waste, zero judgment was kind of this wonderful place where both beginners and advanced can come together and do so in a way where it's not, there's no eco guilt, there's no forcing your opinions on other people. One of my favorite rules of the group is that, you know, we celebrate veganism, but we understand everybody has, you know, different ways of eating in their lives, whether it's, you know, traditional or just what they have access to. So we're not going to fault anyone. That's covered under the zero judgment, is that you don't fault people who have to eat animal products or choose to eat animal products, and you don't fault people who choose not to. And so that's one of our main ones that we have to remind people of every now and then, when people love to pop in there and be like, oh, well, the most sustainable thing would be a fully plant-based diet. And people are like, okay, thanks. Aware, moving on. And but yeah, I really leaned into the zero judgment side of things. We try really hard to limit posts that are like intentionally inflammatory. I know some people love to go on there and be like, well, we should have open discussions about this. It's like, if your goal is open discussion, you're right. But if your goal is, I'm again trying to be loud with my opinion about this and yell at everyone else about why they're wrong, not so much. So we do have certain topics that we limit, although We will even, I will occasionally be like, okay, I'm noticing there are a lot of people asking a question about this. We don't allow our members to post about it, but we're going to do like a heavily moderated post. So I'll put out the question to get the conversation going, and then I'll just make sure I track that post and keep it. But honestly, there's something about putting zero judgment in the name of the group that the members are wonderful about adhering to that just on their own. It's ingrained in them, and they will police each other, or you can tell they'll really like hold back even if their opinion is very strong, and they're wanting to go all out about it, but they will self-moderate and choose to take a different tact. And we have very little moderation we have to do on the group, because it's something about where everyone understands it being a safe space. So that is really, not saying we don't have the occasional troublemakers, and they seem to kind of come in waves. The other fun thing about a Facebook group is the ever-changing algorithm. It is very interesting. I've gotten a little bit of insight. I've talked to both people at like third-party marketing groups that have approached us about doing stuff either with Facebook directly or indirectly. And I'll be like, yeah, and by the way, we're getting zero engagement right now, and we don't know why. And they'll be like, oh, let's look into that for you. And sometimes it changes, and sometimes it doesn't. And you can never really know if it was internal influence or if it was just, something happened with algorithm. We try to post threads that are, topical. Like we do a, sorry, I'm totally hijacking this, by the way. I'm just like, I'm going to tell you everything about this group. Mondays, I try to do the wins fails thread. Tuesdays, I flip flop between the newbie Tuesdays, where like the newbies can ask their questions. I like having a thread for that. I do usually approve the post where people are asking those questions, but sometimes you'll just get like 20 in a row. And it's like, okay, let's do a thread instead and get this all in one. But I also feel like sometimes in a thread where people know it won't come up as its own post, they are more comfortable asking those questions, because then it's actually people who are looking to answer those questions are the ones going into the thread. So we do that on Tuesdays. And the other thing we do on Tuesdays sometimes is trash audit Tuesdays. And that one, I started that one pretty early on, so 2 or 3 years ago, because there are a lot of people that can be a really good way to get them to click in and like start seeing the trash around them, because you just move through your life and you grab a disposable fork and you do not think about it. But if you're going back once a week and taking a look at what's in your trash bin, or just even noticing how many bags you're taking out to the curbside bin, it really starts to make you go, what is in here? What is creating this? And then there are people that, based off of that, they go, well, I could carry my own fork. Half my bin right now is disposable forks. I get them during lunch when I go to the place on the corner. I'll just start bringing my own fork, and that little change can really add up. And then the hope is that they continue forward with that. But yeah, the group has people that are of all different, stages in zero waste. I tend to go back and forth. I was doing really well in 2019, and going into 2020, like we were putting out our bin once every 6 months. Like it was crazy. I was like, wow, it's not that hard to get to this point. And then the pandemic hit, and all those stores where I was bringing my own containers weren't allowing your own containers anymore. And one of my favorite juice companies that had, it was local, I think it's all cold press. They were doing glass bottles that you return. And then during the pandemic, they were having to do disposable plastic bottles. And unfortunately, a lot of those rules, because people even more so went, this is the more hygienic way to do this, have continued to persist now. So like those plastic bottles are still at my favorite juice place. Although this week they announced they're bringing back the glass for limited flavors and stuff. So that's kind of cool. But I think they must be reading my emails or somebody's. And it stinks too, because sometimes you'll find a place that you're like, I love it. They're helping me towards my zero waste journey. And then they change a policy, and your options are complain or don't shop with them anymore. And so there's a lot of small businesses. A lot of them switched to styrofoam during the pandemic, because they were, doing so much takeout and carry out and whatnot, that it was disheartening. And I was like, oh, these are places I've always loved, but now I have to get carry out. But now they've switched to styrofoam because it was cheaper. Like now I don't feel like I can go there anymore. And sometimes I will let them know. It is an awkward conversation to have. That's always the other thing too, is where people are like, I want to do more. And someone's like, oh, well, talk to people. And they're like, oh, I have to talk to people? Like, what can I do that doesn't involve talking to people? So, we try to give people a lot of solutions and answers. I mean, sometimes an email is more, in someone's comfort zone. But yeah, so that was the Trash Hour Tuesday. Wednesdays, the where can I find Wednesdays? We get a lot of that. I'm in this particular area. I'm looking for something kind of post. And it's like, it was getting to be too individualistic and too localized, where it's like, hey, we're a global group. We have people from just about every country that has Facebook anyway. And I'd say only half of our people in our group are like North American. So when people were like, oh, I'm in this tiny suburb outside of Pittsburgh, where is there somewhere around here that has let me bring my own containers. It was like, you really should post that in local groups because the percentage of people in our group that are going to know that is going to be really tiny. But then having a thread for that. So again, people could go through and help each other out. And it's been a very successful thread. We do DIY Thursdays. So that is for making your own, upcycling, things of that nature. And then just over the weekend when I have time, I like to post a lot of polls or other questions to get people thinking. So that's and yeah, we've grown from 3,000 to just over 48,000, hoping to hit 50 here soon. But again, that algorithm will be having tons of membership requests, and then all of a sudden it just goes away. So never know what our numbers are going to look like.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, we first connected because I joined the Zero Waste, Zero Judgment group on Facebook. And I was looking at like a lot of different zero waste options, I think, when I was trying to decide which group to join. And the zero judgment piece is really what kind of like drew me into your group. And yeah, it's interesting to hear about the inner workings of, I guess, how to run and moderate a group and kind of like how you keep the conversation going in a way that is productive and people aren't necessarily just kind of like taking over and shoving their opinions, being like, I'm right,
Yeah.
because I think especially Facebook can get a bad rap in terms of like discourse that happens on the platform. And so I think groups, I'm in a bunch of different Facebook groups. Um, and that's the main reason that I use Facebook. But I think that they can be like a really valuable place to build community, especially like I depending where you live. Like if you can't like find that physical community as easily, I think that's really great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have local moms groups here that I check them every day because there's always someone saying, I have this volunteer opportunity who wants to do it with me, or kids' schools doing a fundraiser, or just asking, questions. We're moving to the area. Where are the good parks? Stuff like that. Like it is. I love being on there. And again, they have a really good sense of communities. Not all the groups do. Um, and another interesting thing about moderating the group, I haven't noticed it as much lately, but every now and then you'll get disagreements between people where you go in and you go, this was all kind of a matter of tone. This was somebody said something and somebody misinterpreted it, because when it's mostly text, it can go that way. And so I usually kind of go in there and go, I'm not going to delete this conversation because I do feel like this was a good conversation, usually. But it looks like this person might have meant more this way, and then this person might have thought it meant this way. Like, can we just, leave it here and either agree to disagree, or try to understand each other going forward. So I've even done every now and then I'll do a post on there that's kind of reminding the group of different, either written guidelines, because we do have our own little code of conduct, or kind of unwritten guidelines of like, give people the benefit of the doubt, don't jump to conclusions. And then the big thing is that because we're global, we're all different ages, everything, we're all completely different perspectives. It means you're going to be coming at this issue from a different perspective, which is actually the great thing about Facebook too, is because if you've already asked all your friends, what's the solution to my problem, and they don't know, putting it out there to so many different perspectives, you're going to get a lot of different potential answers, and hopefully one of them works for you. But then at the same time, then you have people who are coming from that question. You'll get people who's like, oh, what you're saying sounds entitled, or it sounds ableist, or it sounds stuff like that. And it's like, your guys' perspective of the question was different. I don't think that they meant it that way. And so that's been the other interesting thing. But again, a lot less of that lately. I don't know if people are maturing online, or hopefully maybe the people who like to be troublemakers are kind of moving on to other platforms, or things.
Yeah, maybe they're just like migrating away. I don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah, so do you think that zero waste in general, so when we're looking at like approaching zero waste, or maybe like improving your zero waste journey, I don't even want to say improving, but changing the journey, are there certain barriers you think a lot of people face in terms of like actually implementing those lifestyle changes?
Yeah. There are, and I will say too, I've got a business connection to this. So I started my zero waste business here, and I started connecting with other ones all over the state and up and down the West Coast. That turned into connecting with their zero waste shops are also known as refilleries. Although some of them don't carry refill, they just carry a lot of great products, but they're shops that have decided to go completely into it through the lens of reducing plastic waste. And so all of their products do that in some version or another. Some, the one thing I always say about somebody, and it goes for the shop owners, it goes for the customers, it goes for absolutely everybody, is that when you enter into this, there's going to be certain, you're going to fall on a scale of there are going to be certain aspects of it that mean more to you. So for some people, it's fully plant-based, no animal products. Other people are willing to do products that are like byproducts of industry. So a lot of wool or beeswax is actually byproducts of other industries. And then there are people that are just more okay with that because it's a natural product. It's better to use a natural product than a synthetic product kind of thing. So you got people on those scales. Ingredients is one that all the shop owners and the manufacturers are always trying to thread that needle of, like giving the highest quality, most natural, you can pronounce everything on the bottle kind of ingredients, but not making it so expensive that now it's not accessible to just about anybody. And that one is a really, like, people always say, well, just do what you're doing to make it cheaper. And they're like, if we could, we would. Like, we want this to be everywhere. It is literally priced as low as we can sustain. So that's the other thing too, for both consumers and businesses alike. It's not sustainable if you can't sustain it. So if you are like, I am going to spend more on my groceries to make them as low waste as possible, but then you're discovering later. My big one is milk. So we still drink some dairy milk here at the house. We transition mostly. My husband can't even drink dairy milk. We've transitioned mostly to plant-based, but every now and then there's a recipe where like it just works better. And so I was doing the glass half gallons that could be returned. So it was a closed loop system. I know that they take them back in and wash them because I've had conversations with the company and was really loving that. But then as prices went up, the price of that, it already was half gallon was more expensive than a gallon in plastic. As prices went up, it went up even more. And it was just like, I can't always do that. There are days or weeks or months where my budget is not going to allow that. And that's true for everyone. You got to find that balance. If, it's every now and then you do what you can, and every now and then you don't, then that is okay. And I don't think people should feel guilty about it. That whole point being, if there are a lot of people that they decide to make everything themselves, because to them, that is the most sustainable thing to do, is to get all the ingredients themselves, make it all themselves, do everything from scratch. I did a ton of from scratch baking, especially during the pandemic. I felt like I was home more. I could learn a bunch of new recipes. I was making tortillas and muffins and just all these other things that like my family would tend to get in plastic. My bread maker got a lot of use during the pandemic because my family goes through bread like crazy. But I could never find a recipe that they liked. Like, I tried 7, 8 different recipes, never could find a sandwich bread that they liked. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make a lot of fancy breads. You guys are going to eat a lot of fancy breads, but for just the plain sandwich bread, if you got to get it from the store, I understand. And so it's finding that thing that, I couldn't continue to try another 100 bread recipes to find the one. And I do still occasionally try when I've got the time, but I realized making everything from scratch. I know the freezer is your best friend. If you're doing stuff, do it in bulk on the weekends. I love making big batches of soup and stuff like that. Freeze half of it right away, because that's another issue that we have is the food waste. A lot of times people who join the group, that's actually the thing they're trying to reduce is food waste. So there's lots of great tools. The beeswax wraps usually are better for wrapping cut produce, and the veggie bag, crisper bags and bags similar to that are great for extending the life of produce. And then the freezer is it's so wonderful. People should consider using that more. But at the same time, you're sitting there making everything from scratch. I was literally spending like 20 hours a week making everything from scratch. And I hit a point where this isn't sustainable for me anymore. The couple of things that are really easy, I'm going to always do those. These things that are harder, every now and then I might have to not make it from scratch. And I just got to be okay with it.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really like good and valuable point. And maybe a reason why people might shy away from zero waste is because I feel like some creators might demonstrate this like unrealistic expectation. And I think sometimes like adding all of those different pieces to our life can feel really impossible and unapproachable, especially if you're busy. if
Mm.
you have a lot of other responsibilities like pets or children. And one thing that has come up a lot in my conversations with people regarding zero waste is how you do it with kids, because it doesn't feel necessarily very possible with a lot of like kids products or the things that they eat, or like especially even like with infants and then as they grow, because like kids grow so fast, so you're like having to buy all these things. I don't know, I don't have children, so I don't know, but I know that you have children and this is a topic that you'd be able to speak on.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember people talking about wanting to do glass baby bottles. And I'm just like, if it's for a baby, do we need to do glass? But then there are people who are worried about the potential, either the microplastics or what other forever chemicals could be in those plastic options that we don't know about. So I totally understand the people that want to do that. But I was just like, my kids, I don't know. Although I'll admit, I have moved a lot of our dishware away from plastic. I have basically, put a complete stop to anyone microwaving plastic. For a long time, it didn't bother me. And then when I started learning more about it, it was like, okay, that bothers me. We're not doing that anymore. And so sometimes when you trust kids with things that you be really nervous about, they surprise you. And the whole point is they get used to living that way. And they know, okay, this is fragile. I gotta be more careful. Honestly, I think if you'd asked me a year ago, could my son drink out of a regular glass now? I would have said no, based off of how many got dropped. But now he does constantly, and it works out great. And he's aware. And so you just got to help train your kids and be aware. It is hard, not just with kids, but then with spouses who aren't 100% bought in. Where you're like, okay, you got the individually wrapped cheese again. You don't need to do that. I know where an alternative is. It's not hard. But they're like, oh, I was at the store, or I sell soaps. I sell them more wholesale now, but I do still have them retail. I have them here all the time. So when he's like, oh yeah, I picked up a thing of whatever, Dawn dish soap, and I'm like, why would you do that? Like, there are other options. But then it's the whole idea of convenience. Even when somebody, he's like, well, you weren't home. I wasn't gonna go steal from your stock. And it's like, okay, I understand that. Like, people are so beholden to convenience that a big part of zero waste is it's the same with electric vehicles. How much are you willing to be inconvenienced? Gassing up takes 10 minutes, charging is going to take 45. If you just start planning your life around that, then it's not that hard. But there are a lot of people that they're like, they either say they can't, or they're not willing, or whatever else. The bringing your own containers to the grocery store, I go through phases of being really good about it and then not so good about it. And it's just based off of how hectic your life is in that moment. My kids, yeah, and they get a lot of, I'd say most of the plastic that comes into the house is stuff that someone else gave them, because it's really hard to like tell, their Girl Scout troop or their class, we're a low plastic, low waste family. We prefer this not come to our home. They understand if you say they have an allergy, and so there are days where I've wanted to treat it like that, but people just don't understand it. Even low sugar, my kids don't always do great with sugar. We're a sugar loving household, but I've tried to limit it a lot. But how often they'll come home with a cupcake from someone, and it's like, unless you literally treat it like an allergy, no one takes you seriously on it because nobody else is making that noise about it. I find it funny when I'm out to lunch with friends and we're somewhere where they're all using disposable and I'm using my brought from home, and you get a lot of comments. Oh, that's so smart. I should start doing that kind of thing. And it's like, great, I'm influencing everyone. But then the next 10 times we go out to eat, no one else brought theirs. So it's a slow go. It's hard it's always hard for all of these things to kind of fight against the infrastructure that's already been built for us, kind of thing. And so that's why I'm really trying to champion places that they're essentially trying to build new infrastructure by having refill shop options all over. It will be just as convenient as the wasteful alternative. So that's the hope is I already love how many like coffee shops now, if you're gonna dine in, they'll give you an actual mug or an actual glass. And that is wonderful. And it's something that even 5 years ago they weren't doing, but they've gotten influenced by their customers. And I don't think most people would fault them for not doing it, but they're starting to wake up to the trends. So we need to create the infrastructure and make it just as, if not close to as convenient, so that you're not only getting the like true converts that come in, you're actually getting more mainstream people. Um, but yeah, like I said, my kids actually aren't that hard because 90% of what they're going to get is because I gave it to them. So I just make that choice. It's the adults in my life where they're making their own choices, where I now have to influence their choices. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I have also experienced that with like friends or family where there isn't necessarily a grasp on like why I would be doing those things or why I wouldn't want to use something, etc. But I used to get really annoyed by that, and now I see it more as like I can teach them something and like maybe they'll apply it to their life later. Or maybe they won't because they'll forget. But hey, at
Mhm.
least you tried. Adventuring plans on your calendar? Remember to grab your Lava Linens travel towel on your way out the door. Founded by a mother daughter team, Lava Linens crafts durable, luxurious travel towels as a more sustainable and better performing alternative to microfiber and cotton towels. Powered by flax, hemp, and tencel, they're designed to be by your side for years to come. Use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 15% off your next order. I know one thing for me, like why I was seeking out like a zero waste specific group when I found yours, was that I was kind of missing that sense of community and I needed some people to bounce ideas off of. And also, like, if you are not surrounded by other people in your life that are doing the same thing, I think, at least for me, it's harder to continue, like to make it a habit because I just kind of fall into the old patterns.
Yep.
And so for you, how has like being a part of a community and building a community helped improve your zero waste journey?
It's really great. Again, when you have questions like, hey, I want to try making my own laundry powder. Has anyone ever done that before? You'll get tons of responses. And what's nice too is you don't just get tons of responses going, oh, I did, here's the recipe. You'll get people who go, remember, it can be hard on pipes. So if you've got older pipes, it's not the answers can be really thoughtful, much more so than even like a Google search. If you put in, how to make laundry powder, you will get the articles on how to make laundry powder. You might not get the articles about remember all these other reasons that you might want to be careful or consider not doing it. So that's the nice thing about the community is that it is talking to people who have their own perspective and experiences that they are willing to share that. And yeah, it's been incredibly valuable. There are days where you can definitely tell when you're reading people's responses that like you have changed a mind or you have brought someone closer to being able to feel like they can now take that step and make that, whether it's one change or a bunch of changes in their life. And that's really great to see too, is that you both get the influence of other people, but you get to see the influence you have on other people as well.
And obviously, I want people to join your Facebook group, so I'll include that in the show notes and everything. But I'm wondering if someone were to be approaching zero waste, I guess, for the first time, what would be kind of like your pillar of advice, like the number one thing that you should do to make it easier on yourself?
Yeah. I would definitely say one of the best things, because I'd say most people's waste is food related. It's actually easier to change out the non-food related stuff because you're constantly eating. If you're doing 3 meals a day plus snacks, that is constant food you have to be worrying about. So doing the meal prep on weekends, finding recipes to make stuff from scratch, especially, do the trash audit, go, okay, I've got 10 power bar wrappers in here. Could I make this myself? Kind of thing. And starting there to figure out where most of your trash is coming from. If I've had quite a few people that they're like, oh, I need convenience foods and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, do you do much for fresh produce? And they go, no, because it takes so long to prep. And it's like, well, what if you took one day and prepped it all? We have this really great You Pick farm near us. And we go there a couple times during the summer and we'll literally get like 50 to 100 pounds of food. And it's all fresh, unpackaged produce. It's all mostly stuff we picked out of the fields ourselves, cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers. And I will purposely get 20 pounds of bell peppers, bring them all home that night because, fresh picked, they actually have a very fresh picked. They're not certified organic, but they are organic. They just, a lot of times, these local farms won't go through the process of certification because it's arduous and expensive and things of that nature. But because of that, they don't last for long. So I spend like 2 hours on that night. I bring them home, chop them all up, put them in individual, usually stasher bags or some other freezer safe container, and throw them in the freezer. And then I've got fajitas and tortilla soup and all of that for the next 3 months. And doing that just one day, like doing one day of work to make it easier for yourself throughout the week to, have those healthier and lower waste habits is huge. Just throwing a fork in your purse or in your car is huge. There are so many like fancy to go utensil options now that I see all the time where I was like, mine's just a fork out of my drawer. Like you don't have to go fancy. You don't, that's something else too, is one of the best things is use what you have, use it up. How many people come to me and they're like, "Oh, I just got the Costco thing of laundry. Should I give it away? Should I dump it? Like, so I can go with the zero waste option?" I'm like, "No, please use that up." And they're like, "Oh, I feel so bad. I'm not gonna be able to buy from you for 3 months." Like, well, okay, I'll see you in 3 months. Like, the world won't have changed that much in 3 months. And so it's better to just use what you have. I mean, obviously, if you do want to donate things, that's great. Thrifting and secondhand is so huge and can be so helpful. Definitely, especially when it comes to clothes, fast fashion, absolutely horrible. I'm kind of a like a recovering shopaholic slash like clearance rack junkie. And so I still have a hard time where I'm like, oh my God, those pants are $2 and those look so cute on my daughter and she wear them for the next 10 years. Like, I really want to grab them. And I was like, well, but at Goodwill, ones that are like exactly the same, but they've been worn before, I can get those. And then, I'm not perpetuating this. So it's really hard, but um, definitely doing that, whenever you're like, I'm looking for a good deal, it's like, okay, well then you should be looking secondhand first and try there first. And then also, I know there's a lot of people who really rail against Amazon, and I don't like to that toy store that I absolutely love. They pretty much closed because of Amazon. They pretty much closed because people could get all the same things from their store for cheaper, kind of thing. And I've had quite a few local small businesses. We actually, in my city, we don't have a lot. It's all name brand stuff here. We have so few small businesses. It's really sad. And you can just tell the influence that Amazon has had, and big box stores like that have had here. But at the same time, there are people where they're like, I'm in a rural community. I don't have the ability to run to the local store. Or in my case, I don't have a lot of like local stores. So it's either Amazon or Walmart, like lesser of evils kind of thing. That, when people, I'm glad it exists for the people that need it. I wish more of the people who didn't need it would choose different. And I will definitely always talk about that and support that. But at the same time, like, I'm also glad it exists because there's a lot of great zero waste options where people are like, I don't find anyone near me that sells these things, but I could reduce a lot of plastic in my life if I buy this once from Amazon, get it here, and now I'm going to use it, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 times. So it's, you know, double-edged sword, but
Yeah, and I think that's where the zero judgment piece comes in, is because
Mhm.
there are so many different, I guess, barriers to the zero waste journey. Because, like you said, our system isn't necessarily set up for this. It's not setting up consumers for success in a zero waste system. And so we need to kind of like change those things. And so, like, yeah, I personally don't need to use Amazon, but like, it's good that it exists for other people. And it's also like, I think a good reminder that if you don't have the options like immediate to you, then there are other things that you can be doing, and starting with what you have can also be impactful, and you can kind of like build on that as you go. If you've enjoyed listening to this interview and any of our other interviews on the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, we'd love to hear from you. One super easy and free way to support our content is by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. We thank you for listening to and supporting our work so that together we can create a better outdoor space as we recreate. So let's see, those are most of the questions I had for you. Are there other things you wanted to add?
um, not that I can think of. It's been really exciting seeing the small businesses that are popped up, both manufacturers and the retailers. But they are struggling. Like, it's so hard to break into the media atmosphere and get people that know about them. And then it's hard to sustain. A lot of times, again, their products are more expensive, so they're trying to get customers in there, but they'll get a lot of people that choose not to because they're more expensive. But it's that fun thing where if and I've had a couple brands now, as they grew and they got more popular, they were able to optimize their manufacturing process and bring their prices down. And so it's like, if we can just get over this kind of hump with some of these products, we can hit a point where now it can become closer to as affordable as the not zero waste options. We just need to figure out the marketing side to get people to realize where their shops are. I would say the Refillery Collective and the Litterless blog are both really good resources that anytime anybody asks that question on the group, where do I find my local shops? Those are two of the best. I have a website too that it's not up to date right this second, but hopefully it will be. very, very soon by June. Um, that it's called the refill.net. And I did that one where it's actually like a map and directory of all the shops. I did it though, where it was also co-ops and other stores that do let you bring your own container. But since a lot of them have closed or they no longer do, or they've changed what their pottery offering, so I just really need to go through and clean it up a lot. But I'm hoping that that is fully up to date here by the end of this month, and we're going to hopefully do some really cool stuff with it. But yeah, the Refillery Collective and literalist.com both have directories to let people know what their local options are, because a lot of time I get that all the time where people are like, oh, I'm in this city, they don't have anything. It's like, I actually know of two in your area that you just weren't aware of because you happen to not have walked by them, or you happen to not know somebody who shopped there. It's funny how many things people will assume they know versus check to see if they are correct, kind of thing. So definitely the education side is huge. And yeah, just supporting these places that do this, because I mean, I've had a lot of co-ops that have pulled their refill sections because like, oh, nobody was shopping them. And it's like, you put it in like the most obscure corner in the back and then don't advertise it and don't do anything like that. So I try to always let the co-ops know, bring it to the front, make it sound like, hey, this is a big part of what we're doing. Isn't this cool? You kind of get green points for it, you know? I've noticed that a lot where I've had people reach out to me going, oh, I want to be tied to what you're doing because I'm trying to green up my image. And so definitely always keeping an eye out for greenwashing. But it is that thing where it's like, well, I don't want to give a false green veneer to anything that's not actually sustainable. But on the flip side, how often you can get somebody who can help you get excited about this industry that is hopefully growing exponentially, hopefully, to get them excited about it, because they're like, oh, we do want to fund that. We do want to move that direction. And, you guys have already done the legwork. Let us help you, kind of get the rest of the way there. That it's been really cool to see how businesses are starting to see. I know one of the best examples of greenwashing is the Target end caps that are all zero waste stuff. And you're like, this is actually in a plastic bottle that maybe isn't even recyclable in my area. How the heck is that zero waste? Like the word has been co-opted, which is horrible. A lot of the, sustainable natural terminology has all been co-opted to mean things that it does not actually mean. But then at the same time, every now and then I'll look at these options and go, okay, 30% less plastic. Well, if, this is the option, these are the consumers, they're not going to go out to a refill shop anytime soon. Hopefully they're not being sucked in by this. But if this is the difference between them buying the bottle that is 100% not sustainable versus one that is slightly closer, I'm glad that it exists. I'm glad people have the option. I just don't want it to be dressed up as something that is actually false.
Yeah, that is a good point. We do talk a lot about greenwashing on this show. So hopefully people, if you're listening, you're not doing that, but it's a good reminder to be on the lookout for those things. And those are some really great resources that I'll be sure to include in the show notes. And I guess with that, how can listeners join Zero Waste, Zero Judgment and learn more about your online community?
Yeah, we are on Facebook. And when you join, make sure you answer the membership questions. I do all of the membership approvals. And so sorry for anyone that didn't get approved that joined it. We had an issue a few years ago with bots. So I do only approve people that answer the questions, or they've got enough other information in their profile that I can clearly tell, like, this is a person where I could go to their place of work, or I could hang out with their best friend. So it's just easier if you want to be immediately approved, answer the questions. We're not looking for content. We're looking for the fact that you understood them, kind of thing. And yeah, that's the best way, is just get on the Zero Waste, Zero Judgment Facebook group. We love it when we've got lots of new members, and I try to be even more active on there to, first of all, make sure that as we get influxes of new members, everyone is sticking to our Zero Judgment side of it, but then also just to kind of welcome and educate and give people the basics when they join.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll be sure to include that link in the show notes as well. And yeah, thanks for taking the time, Stephanie, to come on the show and talk about the group. And I have found your group really valuable in my time, in my journey of implementing more zero waste options. So I hope other people do too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book, on YouTube, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. For even more updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.